I was only 12 the first time my father turned the key. It was a cold January morning, the kind where the frost bites your skin the second you step outside. But I wasn't stepping outside, I was being dragged. Up the narrow staircase, past the broken picture frames, to the attic door that had always been locked. And this time I was going inside. You know, people talk about childhood memories like they're soft and blurry with the warmth of home and the smell of cookies in the kitchen. But my childhood, it smelled like dust, old wood, and silence. My name is Clara, and I'm 84 now. But when I close my eyes, I'm still that scared little girl standing barefoot on the freezing attic floor, wondering why my father, my own father, was looking at me like I didn't even exist. I had asked him that. I remember my voice trembling. "Daddy, please, what did I do wrong?" He didn't answer, just shut the door. The click of the lock, it was louder than thunder in my ears. That sound meant something had changed forever. The attic was small, dark, and full of forgotten things. Boxes, broken toys, old furniture. And now me. There was one tiny window, but it was nailed shut. No bed, no light switch, just a pile of rags and a bucket. He left me a blanket that smelled like mold and a slice of bread. The days blurred into each other. There was no way to know what time it was, only whether it was cold or colder. Sometimes I would try to count the minutes by my heartbeat, but it made me dizzy. I wasn't allowed to cry, because if I cried, he'd come back. And when he came back, he yelled, sometimes worse. You're probably wondering why. Why would a father lock his daughter away? Well, I wondered that too. At first, I thought maybe I was bad. Maybe I had said something wrong. Maybe I spilled something. Maybe I got a bad grade. But the truth, he didn't need a reason. He just needed control. She was there one day and gone the next. I remember her perfume more than her voice. I think she used to brush my hair. But after my 10th birthday, she disappeared. Father said she ran off with a man. But deep down, I knew he was lying. And when I asked about her, he took away my blanket for 3 nights. I started praying in that attic. Not because I was religious. I didn't know anything about God. But because it was the only thing I could do. I would whisper, "If someone's listening, please help me survive. Please don't let me go crazy." And sometimes the wind would whistle through the cracks. I imagined it was someone saying, "I hear you, Clara. Hold on. That first week, I made a promise to myself. If I ever get out, I'll tell someone. I'll never let anyone else go through this alone." I didn't know then it would be 3 years. But I knew this. I wasn't going to die in that attic. Even if the world forgot I was up there, I wouldn't forget me. In the attic, survival wasn't just about food. It was about understanding his rules. Because the faster I learned what made him angry, the longer I got to live without pain. If I cried too loudly, he would slam the door open and throw things. One time it was a hammer. Another time a book, the one he used to read to me before bed when I was little. I remember watching it hit the floor spine, cracking open like a broken bird. I stayed silent after that. So silent, I began to forget what my own voice sounded like. I used to whisper under the door, "What day is it, Daddy? When can I come out?" But silence was always his answer. And the next morning he'd skip the bread. So I stopped asking. Eventually, I stopped hoping. One morning, I think it was spring, because I heard birds. I stood on a crate to look out the small attic window. I wanted to see the sky. Just one patch of blue. Just to remember what it looked like. But he must have heard the crate shift. When he came in and saw me by the window, he dragged me down by the hair. He yelled so loud it shook the rafters. "You don't get a look at the world you don't belong to." That day, I didn't get food, or a blanket, just the floor, just the cold. I never touched the window again. The food came. Sometimes he would push a plate under the door once a day. Sometimes it was a slice of bread. Sometimes it was just old rice. Once it was raw potatoes. When he was angry, nothing at all. I learned to eat slowly, to savor crumbs like they were cake. The attic became my school. I found an old book buried under a pile of fabric. It was torn, stained, and missing pages. But it had words. And words were a kind of magic. They reminded me I still had a mind, even if my body was trapped. I read the same chapters over and over. I gave names to the spiders. I spoke to the shadows. The day I found the doll tucked behind an old chest, I found her. She was missing one eye and her dress was torn. But I hugged her like she was the last person in the world. Her name was Marjorie. I told her everything, all the things I couldn't say to the walls. "Marjorie," I whispered, "if I disappear, will you remember me?" She never answered. But she never left me either. When your world is 4 walls, a bucket, and silence, you make your own universe. I tapped rhythms with my fingers and pretended I was a drummer in a band. I created plays in my mind with imaginary characters who came to rescue me. I counted the spiders every morning to make sure they were still there. It meant I wasn't completely alone. What's worse than pain, you might think the worst part was the beatings, or the hunger, or the dark. But no, the worst part was thinking maybe I deserved it. That maybe I was truly forgotten, that I could vanish, and the world wouldn't blink. But one night, after almost fainting from hunger, I looked at that cracked window pane and said out loud, "I'm still here, I'm still Clara, and I'm not gone yet." Even if no one could hear me, I could. And sometimes that's where healing begins. Some people say time heals all wounds, but in that attic, time didn't heal. It simply forgot me. I became the girl the world forgot. Days passed, weeks, maybe months. I stopped counting after I lost my place on the wall. I used to mark days with a piece of broken wood. But one stormy night, the rain leaked through the ceiling and washed away everything I had scratched. It felt like the attic erased my existence one drop at a time. The sounds I clung to. There were only 3 things I could hear: footsteps, my father's boots on the stairs. I memorized the weight of each step. The wind, sometimes gentle, sometimes screaming. The rats, they were bold, and at night they came too close. The silence between those sounds was unbearable. So I sang. Whispers, really. Old nursery rhymes I barely remembered. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." Sometimes I rewrote them. If I stay quiet, if I don't cry, maybe the pain will pass me by. The season I nearly gave up. There was a winter, I think my second. The cold was like a second skin impossible to shake. The blanket was threadbare. The bucket froze over. The bread stopped coming. I lay curled in a corner, holding Marjorie tight, my lips cracked, my body aching. That night, I whispered to the attic, "If you want to take me, it's okay, I'm tired." And then I heard something. A voice, a child's voice. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then it came again. A little girl, laughing, from the yard. I crawled to the tiny window and peeked through a sliver of light between 2 boards. There she was, a girl with red mittens chasing a dog. I pressed my face against the cold glass. She was real. And I realized something. I'm still part of the world, even if no one knows it. That moment saved me. The day he forgot to lock the door, it was spring maybe. The air smelled different, less stale. He had been drinking. I heard the slurred steps. He shoved a stale bun under the door and muttered something I couldn't make out. But that day, the door clicked differently. And when I pushed it, it opened. I stood at the top of the stairs, barefoot, trembling. There was no light below, no voices, no music, just the scent of liquor and old wood. I could have run, but I didn't, because I was too scared of what was out there. I turned back, closed the attic door, and locked myself in. Why didn't I escape? It's something I've asked myself 1,000 times. Why didn't I run? Why didn't I scream? The truth, when you've been in the dark long enough, the light becomes terrifying. I had made a home out of hell, and I was afraid to leave it behind. That was the day I learned. You don't need ropes to be imprisoned. Sometimes fear is the chain, and silence is the lock. But the seed of escape was there, and one day soon, I would try again. After I locked myself back inside that attic, I didn't sleep for 2 days, because now I knew something terrifying. The world still existed without me. People were out there living, laughing, running, while I was nothing more than a shadow behind a door. But it also meant something else. Maybe, just maybe, someone could find me. About a week later, I heard something new. A whistle. Not my father's drunken mumbling, not the wind or the rats. A woman's voice, soft, humming a tune, moving across the yard. I crept to the window. There she was, a laundry lady laying sheets out in the sun behind the house. She didn't look up, but I stared at her like she was an angel in an apron. I tried to get her attention. I tapped on the glass softly at first. then harder. But the window was too small, too high, too covered in dust and old cobwebs. She kept folding, hanging, and humming. I pressed my hand against the glass. Then I whispered, "Please, look up, please." She didn't, and after a few minutes, she packed her basket and left. The world below, still blind. I watched her disappear down the hill, and something in me cracked. Not like a scream, not even a sob. Just a long, slow exhale, like air escaping a balloon that had been holding on too long. I turned from the window and whispered, "You were so close. You were right there." That night, I didn't eat. Not because my father didn't bring food. I just didn't want it. The line between real and imagined, the attic began to blur the edges of my mind. I would dream with my eyes open. I started talking to Marjorie again, only this time she talked back. "They don't see you, Clara, because you're not loud enough." "Be louder," she said. "But how do you scream for help when you've forgotten what your own voice sounds like?" I left her a message. The next time I saw the laundry lady, I did something different. I found a scrap of paper under an old chest. I tore it, wrote on it with a rusty nail dipped in soot and spit. "I'm here. I'm alive. Please help me, the attic. Please." I slipped it into a crack between the wooden slats under the tiny window. The wind took it. Or maybe it didn't. I'll never know. She never came back. Not the next day, not the next week, not ever. Maybe she never saw the note. Maybe she did. And chose not to believe it. Or maybe she told someone, and they laughed. I stopped looking after that. I gave up on the window for a while. Even hope was exhausting. So I folded Marjorie's torn dress like it was laundry and laid her beside me. Then I curled into a ball and whispered, "If no one's coming, then I'll be my own rescue." That day was different. Not because I was stronger, but because I realized waiting would not save me. If I ever wanted to escape the attic, I'd have to become more than a whisper. I'd have to become the storm. I don't know what changed that morning. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was hunger. Maybe it was simply enough. But when I heard his boots on the stairs, I didn't curl into the corner like I used to. This time I stood. The door creaked open. He didn't even look at me. Just shoved a plate of something gray and wet across the floor. He turned to leave. And that's when I did it. I spoke, "Why are you doing this to me?" My voice was hoarse, cracked, dry like old paper. But it was mine. It lived. He froze. Not fully, not dramatically, just a twitch in his shoulders, a pause in his breath. Then he turned around. Slowly. And for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. I stared back. He stepped forward, raised his hand. And I didn't flinch. I looked him in the eye and whispered again. "You don't get to break me. He didn't hit me that day." He slammed the door, hard. So hard, the old hinges rattled. But he didn't raise his hand. And something in me shifted. Not because I won, not because I was safe, but because I didn't shrink, not this time. I began to plan. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The crack under the door was just wide enough to push something sharp through. The nails in the window boards were rusted, maybe loose. The water pipe that ran along the wall had a leak, and leaks make noise. Maybe someone outside could hear? For the first time in years, I stopped waiting for rescue. I started building it. I made a routine. Each morning I stretched my fingers and legs. Not much room in that attic, but I moved anyway. I scratched small plans on the wood floor with broken nail tips. I practiced whispering, then speaking, then yelling. The mind becomes a weapon. I taught myself to think differently. Not like a prisoner, but like a chess player. Every step he took, every word he mumbled, every night he forgot to lock the door fully. I cataloged it. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was strategy, one goal. The day of escape, I didn't know when, I didn't know how. But I started to believe something I hadn't believed in a long time. I will get out of this attic. I will step outside. I will feel the sun on my skin again. And I will never go back. That night, I looked at Marjorie and whispered, "No more crying, no more waiting. Tomorrow, I start testing the window." For the first time, she didn't feel like a doll. She felt like a witness. And I, Clara, the girl in the attic, I was becoming something my father never expected. A fighter. The attic window had always been a lie. A piece of glass behind boards, a symbol of light I couldn't reach. But now it was my mission. The first inspection, I climbed up again carefully. The old crate creaked beneath me, but I balanced myself on tiptoes. My fingers brushed against the wooden slats. Nails, rusted, one corner loose. Not much, but enough. Enough to try. I needed tools. I scavenged everything I had. A snapped piece of metal from an old lamp. A broken spoon with a jagged edge. The sharp tip of a tin lid I had hidden weeks ago. I wrapped the sharp end with cloth so I wouldn't cut myself. And each day while he was passed out downstairs, I pried. Slowly, quietly, patiently. It took me 41 days. Yes, I counted. Because when you're surviving, progress matters more than food. Each loose board felt like an inch of freedom, like a breath I hadn't taken since I was 12. Sometimes I bled. Sometimes I cried from the frustration of a board that wouldn't budge. But I never stopped. The first ray of air. One morning it happened. The bottom right board gave a little groan, then pulled back half an inch. Air, real air. Dusty, yes, but alive. I gasped like I'd forgotten how to breathe. I pressed my face into that crack and let the breeze touch my skin. It was like being touched by God himself. Then I saw her down below in the neighbor's yard, a girl maybe my age brushing her hair on a porch swing. She was humming. I watched her for 10 full minutes, not because I thought she'd see me, but because she reminded me, I am still human, I still exist, I can still be seen. I made another note this time with clearer writing. I scraped soot from the wall, mixed it with spit again, and carefully printed. My name is Clara. I live in the attic. I've been locked in here for years. Please help me. I folded the paper and tucked it through the crack, just enough for the wind to maybe carry it. I prayed again. The light returned inside me. That night I didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I lay on my ragged blanket and whispered to the ceiling. One day closer. Marjorie lay beside me, her stitched face turned toward the stars I couldn't see. I only removed one board. It wasn't enough to escape yet, but it was enough to believe. To know that I could change something, move something, fight something. For the first time, the attic wasn't my coffin. It was a battlefield. And I was learning how to win. I was proud of myself. One board loose, one whisper sent into the wind. But in the attic, even hope has a cost. And it didn't take long before he noticed. The heavy steps, his steps were louder than usual. Deliberate, measured. I knew that sound, not the clumsy stagger of drunken nights, but the controlled stomp of a man looking for something. And when he opened the attic door, his eyes were sharper than ever. Did you touch the window? His voice was quiet. Too quiet. Did you touch the window? I stayed still, but my fingers began to tremble. He took a step closer. His boots crushed my plate from the night before. Are you trying to be clever? I shook my head, but my body betrayed me. Eyes glancing toward the crate in the corner. He saw it. He snapped. He lunged across the attic like a storm kicked the crate and threw it into the wall. It shattered. Then he saw the tools. The bent spoon, the twisted wire, the ripped cloth with soot stains. His face turned red, then white. He didn't speak. He just grabbed the window board and nailed it shut again. 4 nails, 6 hits each. I counted them like gunshots. Everything closed again. He locked the door harder than ever. And this time, he took the broken spoon. He took Marjorie. He took everything. And then, the dark came back. The window was gone. The light was gone. The breeze, gone. And I was gone too. For 3 days, I didn't move. I didn't eat. I didn't even whisper. Because for a moment, I believed he had finally won. But he made a mistake. He thought the attic had broken me again. But he didn't know. Hope doesn't die, not when it has tasted the air. I waited until he stopped watching so closely. Because I knew something he didn't. You can nail the boards, you can steal the light, but you can't stop someone who remembers what freedom smells like. The worst part, he burned Marjorie. I know it sounds silly crying over a doll, but she wasn't just fabric, she was my witness. The only soul who had seen every silent tear, every whisper of courage. When I saw her scorched remains in a bucket outside the door, I didn't cry. I clenched my fists and said, "You burned the doll, but not the girl." That night, I scratched 3 new words into the wooden floor with a nail I hid beneath my foot. He won't win. And this time, I wasn't going to tap on windows. I was going to find the way out. They say when your world becomes small, you begin to see everything. Every crack, every sound, every weakness in the walls that hold you. I began to build a map, not of the attic itself. I knew every splinter of that place. But of him. My father, his patterns, his habits. The way he walked the time he drank, how long he disappeared when he went into town. I didn't write it down with ink. I had no pen, no paper. So I used my blood. A tiny cut, a hidden code. I scraped my finger one night on a broken nail, and then an idea sparked. I dipped that same finger into the cut and began tracing tiny dots onto the attic floor behind a beam beneath a loose board. Not words, codes, symbols only I understood. Each dot meant something. One step closer to escape. 1 hour alone. 1 night without food. 1 opportunity. My secret map of time, of patterns, of possibility. The second weakness. A week later, I found it. Near the far corner of the attic, behind a rotted box full of mouse droppings and newspaper. The floorboard shifted under my foot. Soft, mushy, water damaged. I pressed harder. It cracked. Then cracked again. Underneath, a hollow space. Not an exit, not yet. But enough to hide things. I began collecting again. My tools had been taken. But I still had my hands. And I still had my mind. I pulled loose staples from inside old furniture. I twisted buttons into sharp tips. I snapped the leg off a wooden chair and shaved it down on the floor until it became a wedge. This time, I wouldn't store them by the window. This time, I'd hide them in the hollow. I waited. One night, I heard him leave. Not for an hour, but for 5. The house below was silent. No coughing, no footsteps. I knew he'd gone into town, probably to drink. That night, I tested the wall. The false panel. There was one side of the attic covered in mismatched boards. It looked like someone had patched it quickly. And when I knocked on it, it echoed. There was space behind it. I didn't have a crowbar. I didn't even have a screwdriver. But I had the chair leg and determination. I began to dig each night a few minutes at a time. Careful not to make noise, careful not to shift too much. I scratched. I pulled. The wood was dry, brittle in places. And one night, I pried a board loose. Behind it, a narrow crawl space. Dark, dusty, crumbling. But wide enough for me to fit through. I didn't crawl into it yet. I wasn't ready. But I whispered into the hole. I see you, I found you, and I'm coming through. This wasn't just escape. This was rebirth. And I was already shedding the skin of the girl he thought would never rise again. The crawl space behind the attic wall wasn't a way out yet. But it was a way forward. The first crawl, I waited until night. Until the silence below was thick and heavy. Until I could smell the liquor in the air from beneath the floorboards. Then I slipped through the opening. The air inside was different. Stale, yes, but not dead. It smelled like old books and dust and freedom. The darkness had its own voice. As I moved forward on my elbows, the wood scraped my arms raw. Cobwebs kissed my face. Something scurried past my hand, a mouse or something worse. But I kept going. I counted seconds in my head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. I made it 27 Mississippis in before the tunnel curved downward. The darkness had its own voice. As I moved forward on my elbows, the wood scraped my arms raw. Cobwebs kissed my face. Something scurried past my hand, a mouse or something worse. But I kept going. I counted seconds in my head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. I made it 27 Mississippis in before the tunnel curved downward. A wall, not solid, but close. I reached a point where the crawl space narrowed to almost nothing. A wall, old bricks. I pressed my ear to it. Behind it, nothing, no movement, no wind. But the temperature changed. Cooler. Maybe an old storage space. Maybe an empty room. Maybe a part of the house he didn't go to anymore. The plan formed I would widen the tunnel, little by little. Make it so I could crawl through and reach the other side. I returned to the attic, arms bleeding, knees bruised. But my eyes, alive. For the first time in years, I had found another way. The schedule by day, I was silent, still, invisible. By night, I was a ghost, moving through the crawl space like a soldier in enemy territory. I'd pry bricks loose with broken tools, wrap the sharp ends in rags, hide everything in the hollow under the floor. I mapped every inch of the tunnel in my mind. 6 feet long, 2 turns, 1 brick away from the other side. The night he came early, I was mid-crawl, sweating, prying at the wall with a jagged hook. Then I heard at the door. The attic door. It creaked open. I froze. He wasn't supposed to be home yet. But he was. And worse, he was calling my name. Clara, where are you hiding, girl? I didn't move. I held my breath. So still that even the dust dared not shift. He walked around the attic. His boots hit the floor like warning bells. I waited. 5 minutes, 10. Then finally the doors slammed shut. I didn't move for another hour. I crawled back, shaking. That was the closest I'd come to being caught. But it didn't stop me. Because now I knew, if I'm quiet enough, careful enough, I can move under his feet and he'll never know. The next night I pried loose the final brick. Behind it, a small space, empty, not an exit but a room. A way around the attic. A path that could lead me to a stairwell, a vent, a window, anything. I whispered into the darkness. You took my mother, you took 3 years of my life, but you won't take my future. And with blood on my palms and dirt on my face, I stepped into the hollow beyond. The space behind the brick wall wasn't just a room. It was a graveyard of secrets. The forgotten storage. As I stepped through the opening, the air shifted. Cooler, moustier, but breathable. It was a small room, maybe a storage space once. There were shelves collapsed against the walls. Boxes covered in thick blankets of dust. And in the center, a trunk. The trunk he never meant me to find, it was locked. But the hinges were weak. One sharp twist with my makeshift tool, and it creaked open like it hadn't in decades. Inside, letters, photographs, old newspaper clippings, and something that stopped my breath. A locket, my mother's. Her face. I remembered the photo inside the locket was faded, but I knew her eyes. Gentle, brown. The same eyes that used to look at me when I was sick when she brushed my hair. Mom? I hadn't said that word in so long that it felt foreign on my tongue. And then at the bottom of the trunk I found it. A letter addressed to her. It was dated just weeks before she disappeared. I unfolded the fragile paper. If you tell anyone, I'll say you're insane. No one will believe you. You're lucky I'm letting you stay this long. Don't forget who owns this house. It was signed. My father. The memory rushed back. I remembered the screaming downstairs. Her whispering goodnight to me for the last time. The slam of the door. I used to think she left us, abandoned me. But now, she didn't leave. He got rid of her. And suddenly my attic wasn't just a prison. It was a cover-up. A way to erase me like he erased her. The rage was different this time. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was cold, precise. You killed her, I whispered to the dust. And you buried me so no one would ask questions. But you forgot one thing. I'm still alive. I searched for more. I tore through every box. One held baby clothes mine. Another held receipts documents in my mother's name that had been crossed out. And in one corner, buried under a blanket, a photo of the 3 of us. Me, her, and him. He was smiling. But now that I saw it again, it wasn't warmth. It was control. Even in that photo, he held her hand just a little too tight. Footsteps too close. Suddenly, I heard a creak. Not mine, below me. He was pacing, mumbling. I couldn't make out the words, but his tone was growing sharp, paranoid. Where is she hiding it? He was looking for something. Maybe the missing key. Maybe the sound he thought he heard in the night. Maybe me. I clutched the photo to my chest. For the first time in 3 years, I felt connected to the girl in that picture. Not as a prisoner, not as a ghost, but as a daughter. And I made a promise to my mother. I will finish what you started. I will get out. And I will tell the world who he really is. Once you learn the truth, you can't unlearn it. And once I knew what he did to my mother, the attic couldn't hold me anymore. The clue I left behind, I couldn't scream. I couldn't break down the door. But I could whisper through the cracks of the world. So I made a plan to leave a clue where someone else might see it. Not just a cry for help, evidence. The photo, I took the photo of the 3 of us and carefully tore away the bottom. On the back, I wrote in tiny letters using charcoal scraped from a scorched rafter. Clara R. Attic, locked 3 years. Father, dangerous, help. I folded it small, wrapped it in fabric. Tied it with a hair from my braid. Then waited for the right moment. The loose board. The crawl space had a vent one that led to an old grate near the outside wall. I had noticed it weeks before, but it had been too high to reach. Now, with pieces of wood stacked just right, I could slide the photo into the vent shaft and let the wind carry it to whoever might clean the gutters or walk too close. I whispered as I let it go. Don't come for me. Just tell someone. I became a spy. From that day on, I studied him even harder. Every time he went into town, I timed his return. I sniffed his breath through the floorboards to know how drunk he was. I kept track of every locked cabinet, every key left too close to the edge. And then the opportunity one afternoon. He passed out in the living room after shouting at no one. I heard the crash of a bottle, the long silence after, and then snoring. I crept out of the crawl space and peeked through a crack in the attic door. There, on the hall table, a ring of keys. My heart stopped. It had been so long since I'd even considered touching that door. But now, I wasn't just considering it. I was ready. The quietest moment, the house was still. Birds chirped outside like the world had never been broken. I waited, held my breath. Then I slid a thin wire through the crack and dragged the ring of keys closer. Closer, until it touched my fingers. I tried every key, some didn't fit. Some turned but didn't click. And then one did. A soft turn, a smooth, deep click. The lock gave way. For the first time in 3 years, the door opened from my side. I didn't step out right away. I stood there staring at the hallway beyond, trembling. The light hit my face like a slap. I had escaped rooms in my mind, tunnels in the wall, the silence of being erased. But this was the edge of the world, and soon I would cross it. I stood at the top of the stairs barefoot, shaking, the key still warm in my palm. And for the first time in 3 years, the attic was behind me. The house was asleep. The windows were dark. The air was thick with the smell of whiskey and old rage. I crept down the stairs step by step, my heart pounding louder than my footsteps. He was on the couch, passed out, face turned toward the ceiling mouth-open bottle on his chest. I froze behind the banister, watching him breathe. It was the first time I'd seen his face this close in years, and it shocked me. He looked small, older, almost fragile. But I knew better. This man wasn't harmless. He was a cage with skin. The front door, I saw it. A few feet away, locked, of course. But I had keys now. I moved like smoke, silent, thin, barely there. When I reached the door, my hands shook so hard I dropped the ring. The keys clattered on the floor. He stirred, I froze. He grunted, shifted, then snored again. I covered my mouth to keep from sobbing. Then slowly, I picked the keys up again, one by one, barely breathing. The key fit. The third key turned with a soft click. The bolt slid back. The knob turned. And for the first time in years, the door opened. The air hit me like a scream cold, wild, real. I stepped outside. The ground beneath my feet felt unreal, like it belonged to someone else's life. The sky above me was full of stars, too bright, too open. I wanted to collapse. I wanted to run. So I ran. I didn't know where I was going down the hill, past the rusted mailbox, through the broken fence. I didn't stop until my lungs burned. Somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd mile, I collapsed in a ditch beside a country road. I looked back once, just once. The house was a speck in the distance. But I swear I saw a light flicker upstairs. He knew. He knew I was gone. A truck's headlights. At first, I was afraid. I thought maybe it was him. But no, a pickup truck. It slowed, stopped. A woman stepped out, middle-aged, wearing overalls. Her voice was like thunder wrapped in honey. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" I couldn't speak. I just held out the photo I'd taken from the trunk. She looked down, read the back, and her eyes filled with tears. That night, I wasn't just a girl who escaped the attic. I became real again. Someone saw me, heard me, believed me. I didn't have shoes, I didn't have strength, but I had proof, and now I had a witness. The woman's name was June. She worked at a feed store nearby and lived on that long road I'd collapsed beside. She took one look at me, and somehow, without me saying a word, she understood everything. She didn't ask much. She wrapped me in an old quilt from the truck. Her hands were warm, steady. "You don't have to talk," she said. "You're safe now." Okay. And those words, "you're safe now," they shattered me, because I had never heard them before. Her house smelled like cinnamon and earth. It was small, simple, but it felt like a palace to me. She sat me at her kitchen table, gave me soup I couldn't finish, and called someone. Not just anyone, the sheriff. I wanted to disappear. When the deputy came, I curled up like I used to in the attic. I thought maybe they wouldn't believe me. Maybe they'd say I made it up. Maybe they'd take me back. But June held my hand and said, "Show him the photo." So I did, and something changed. The deputy took one look at the back of the torn picture, read my tiny letters, and stood up straight like someone had punched him in the chest. He got on the radio, said words like, "Possible felony confinement. Send unit to confirm. Minor female visible trauma." And then he knelt beside me, looked me in the eye, and asked the question I never thought I'd hear. "Is your name Clara?" I nodded, barely. "You're safe now, and we're going to take care of this." I wasn't invisible anymore. They didn't treat me like I was crazy. They didn't question every detail. They took notes, took photos of my bruises, asked permission every time before they touched anything. That night I slept in a real bed, with real sheets. And for the first time, no locks. The questions came later: a social worker, a nurse, then a counselor with soft eyes. They asked, "How long were you in the attic? Did he ever hurt you physically? What do you remember about your mom?" Some questions hurt, some made me freeze, but each one was a needle stitching my story together again. Piece by piece, the part that lit the fire. When they searched the house, they found the attic exactly as I left it. The crawl space, the burned remains of Marjorie, the blood-stained floorboards, the trunk, and the letter from my father to my mother. That changed everything. No more questions, no more doubt. Now it wasn't just my word, it was evidence. For 3 years, I was just a shadow behind a locked door. But now I had a file, a birth certificate, a social worker who called me sweetheart and told me I was brave. And when the sheriff came back one day with his hat in hand, he said something I'll never forget. "We're charging him, Clara. He's not going to hurt anyone again." And for the first time, my name felt real in my mouth. They say courtrooms are about justice. But for me, it was about being heard, being seen, without the dust, without the attic. Just me, Clara, in a chair facing the man who took everything. The first time I saw him in chains, he looked older, thinner. His eyes darted searching the room. But when they landed on me, they didn't flinch. Because even now, he didn't believe I had made it this far. The courtroom listened. The judge asked if I wanted to speak. My social worker said I didn't have to, that I could just submit a statement. But I said, "No, I want to say it out loud." And I stood up, my knees shaking, my palms sweating. But my voice, strong. What I told them, I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I told them what I remembered. The window boards, the rotting blanket, the food or lack of it, the crawl space, Marjorie, the smell of the wood when I started planning my escape. And then I said the part that mattered most. I was a child, and he locked me away because he thought no one would care enough to notice. But someone did. I looked at June in the crowd. She was crying. So was the bailiff. The verdict, they found him guilty on all counts. Felony confinement, child endangerment, destruction of evidence, and suspected involvement in my mother's disappearance still under investigation. He was sentenced to life in prison, no chance of parole. I didn't cheer, didn't smile. I just exhaled. Because justice doesn't erase pain, but it proves you were telling the truth. After the trial, people started saying words like, "You're so brave, Clara. You're a miracle. You're an inspiration." But I didn't feel brave. I felt tired, relieved, raw. Like someone had opened the attic door inside me, and light was pouring in slowly, too much at once. Healing was slow. I didn't adjust right away. I jumped when doors slammed. I couldn't sleep with lights off. I kept a spoon under my pillow for weeks just in case. But every morning I opened the window and let the breeze touch my face, because now I didn't have to imagine what freedom felt like. I was living it. When I left the courthouse that day, a reporter tried to ask me questions. I said only one thing. My name is Clara. I'm not the girl in the attic anymore. And I walked away on my own feet, into a world that finally had room for me. It's been 72 years since I last stood in that attic. I'm 84 now. People call me Mrs. Clara Richardson. They smile when they see me at the grocery store, or when I walk with my garden cane down the street. Most of them have no idea. But sometimes, the past visits. Like when I hear the sound of a creaking stair, or when the wind rattles a loose shutter, and for a second, just a second, I'm back there 12 years old in the dark. But the difference now, I'm not trapped anymore. I can open the door, I can turn on the light. And I do. I built a life, I got married, had 2 sons. They know everything. and they love me more fiercely than I ever thought possible. I have grandkids now. One of them, Emma, loves to play with the doll I made for her from scraps. She named it Marjorie. I didn't tell her why that name matters, not yet. One day I will. I wrote my story down, not for revenge, not for fame. But because someone out there, maybe the girl listening right now in a silent room, needs to hear this. You are not alone. Your voice matters. And no matter what they took from you, you are still here. The attic is gone. They tore down the house years ago, built condos on the land. But I kept one thing, a single wooden beam from the attic floor. It sits in my living room. And carved into it, still faint but visible, are the 3 words I scratched with my own blood. He won't win. It's a story about survival, about light pushing through the cracks, about a girl who was forgotten but refused to disappear. So if you're hearing this and you've ever felt trapped, voiceless, erased, remember what I say now with a voice that took decades to reclaim. I was locked away, but I didn't die there. I lived, I rose, and I'm still here.